this idea of you can't be spiritual and wealthy too is actually just a way of keeping spiritual people broke. There have been so many times where I'm like, oh, I just want to throw it all away and get a 9 to 5. I learned a lot by getting really good at one thing before I started branching out into other.
How do you usually advise people to get started on the coaching path? Hi, and welcome to a new episode of The Light Leaders. And today we're going to talk about, is money spiritual? Is making money with a coaching business like Regina is doing something spiritual, aligned with our values? We'll talk about the law of attraction and building a successful coaching business also more in general. So Regina, welcome to the show. You're a spiritual business mentor, psychic, and medicine woman who works with spiritual CEOs all over the world to call in their next level leadership, wealth, and impact. You do it with your many workshops, masterminds, and retreats to the Amazon with the Yawanawa indigenous tribe. And you've helped hundreds of people worldwide and have generated 800,000 in revenue with integrity. So I'm excited as a coach also myself who wants to do things with integrity, which I feel most of the light leaders want to do too. Excited to have a conversation with you on these topics. And for the people watching, you can check the chapters below if you want to go to the part that interests you the most. My first question to you, Regina, is what are you grateful for today?
Love this. And hi, I'm so happy to be here, Alex. It's been so cool just, yeah, getting to see you after such a long time in Bali. What am I grateful for? I would say my home. I'm living in Costa Rica and I was just driving on my ATV today, looking at the jungle and the nature, just in awe of where I live. So, yeah, my home, Costa Rica, being able to live here, I'm really grateful.
Amazing. Thank you. And yes, we've known each other personally from the time in Bali. I got actually that beautiful Yawanawa bracelet from you that I love. And it's interesting that you're connected to that business world. And at the same time, you were even in a relationship with a Yawanawa man for a few years, right? And you've been deep in the work with Mother Ayahuasca and the
Yeah.
jungle. And so it's going to be interesting to reconcile these two things that sometimes people feel they have to choose from. Am I going to go in the jungle and go on that inner quest, or am I going to play in the world and build a business? Right?
hmm That's a question I had too. And I think it's a big one because, of course, like even so many of the people that you work with were spiritual in nature. So there is that duality that you have to juggle with that I've had to move through myself for sure.
Amazing. And you've done so well since you were here in Bali, like, and I've met you maybe 5 years ago or something. And you also worked with Elina that I've had on the podcast, Elina Ray. And I think both of you have expanded your wealth and your business a lot in the past few years. So excited to learn from you two on that topic. Can you share a little bit? Like, has it been to have a thriving coaching business in the past few years?
It's crazy. I mean, like you said, when I met you, I was broke. I was lost, confused. I mean, you met me right at honestly the beginning of my spiritual awakening. And I had no idea what I was doing, like a lost little chicken with my head cut off. And then so much has happened in the last 5 years that set me on this adventure of investing in myself, in my personal development and healing, and then hand in hand sharing what I was learning, and then becoming a life coach, and then from there becoming a business coach, and then getting whisked to the Amazon rainforest to sit with ayahuasca. And then from there, that started a whole new journey. And it has been just like 5 years of exponential growth, of learning so much about myself and about business as well. Like you said, right? Being able to call in this revenue with integrity has been something that has definitely defined this path as I've had to navigate business in a world that's not typically spiritual, right? Like typically. And I love that you work with you have so many people on your podcast where we're showing that there is a different way. It's like the third way. We're carving the new way of business in the new earth.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Option C, kind of, option A, make a lot of money without integrity. Option B, renounce the world. Option C, stay on your spiritual path and also build a business. So I think that's exciting. We live in a world where I feel there is, what money helps, which is a beautiful way to get my fruits delivered and go to ecstatic dance in Ubud and live my life, travel around the world and all this. Obviously, I'm very grateful for money on an everyday basis in our society. And at the same time, I feel there is, a lot of unfairness in the world. And sometimes it's because a lot of people who have a lot of the money are maybe generating more money, I feel, in ways that aren't always ethical. And I think that's why sometimes, maybe even myself, I'm like, I don't want to be associated with maybe like the rich that take advantage of people instead of giving or building. So how do you reconcile that? Do you feel, as a light worker, making money is spiritual and in alignment?
100%. It's so funny too because about a couple of weeks ago, I posted a reel on Instagram, and it was like part of a trend. Like, I lied, put your clothes back on. Let's talk about how this idea of you can't be spiritual and wealthy too is actually just a way of keeping spiritual people broke, which in fact, they are the ones that need the money because we are going to use it in conscious ways and actually pour into society through the conscious lens. And that's fully what I stand behind. And I had to move through a lot of my own limiting beliefs around this. Even actually, when you met me in Bali, I was really deep in the spiritual journey. I was meditating every day. I had become a yoga teacher. So I was really studying that. And there was a part of me that thought, oh, I need to renounce the material realm, right? I cannot, enjoy luxury or have a big house because that's not spiritual of me. And I understand why I had that mentality because in many ways, if we actually look at the Buddhist practices or these deep spiritual beliefs, even in Hinduism, there is this notion of not over identifying or being overly attached to the material. And there's validity in that. However, recognizing where we are in society as a collective and what we need to build, I feel like there is a responsibility for us to take ownership of this and understand that, yes, there is merit to that if our path right now was solely focused on the spiritual. But where we're at right now, creating this new earth, we have to bring home the duality between the material and the spiritual realm. That's what so many of our purposes are. So, like you said, it's like finding the third way. And I always bring this analogy up too. It's like there's a game that's going on, and the way that we're going to change it is not by sitting on the sidelines and watching the game. It's going to be about, putting our soccer cleats on and going out and playing the game too. And I just feel like that's the best way to create change. But like, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think so too. And that's what I've been playing with. I also like what you share about attachment, because you can also be attached to the idea of non-attachment. You can also be attached to the idea of renouncing, right? So when you do the opposite of a conditioning, it's still a conditioning, at least if it's done unconsciously. So if you don't want to be attached to money and then you create that attachment that you shouldn't have money, it's also an attachment. So it's, for me, it's finding that place of surrender where maybe that surrender leads to following my excitement. I want to create a business, have money to make impact a certain way. And I feel that's the case for me. So I'm not one of those people that will say, to it, you have to make money to be spiritual. I think if you're a monk and you feel it's your life's path, it's amazing. Or a sadhu, it's amazing. I just don't feel it's mine. And I feel if I force myself into being that because I feel it's a higher spiritual imperative to do so, it is actually not surrender. it is actually an attachment to a certain ideology. So that's where, yeah, for me, I feel if you feel it's really your calling, and for anyone watching, right, that you're excited about building a business, about making money, using that money to create impact somehow, I think it's amazing. And that person, or myself in that case, should pursue that. And at the same time, if you feel super excited about renouncing the world, let's say, and being more in those different realms of consciousness while during that time in the body, and still taking action through prayer, which I believe impacts the collective field through frequencies, good, it's amazing too, as long as it's authentic, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just trusting your own path, but we know that's not our path in this lifetime.
Yeah,
Definitely
I
have
mean,
thought about it. There's been times
mm,
where I'm like, oh, should I just go meditate in a cave somewhere?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to see what we like, the world we live in. We live in a world where money is very important for so many things. And we live in a world where media also, that's why I'm doing this podcast, is a big way to impact people, right? So to me, it feels natural to do it. I'm also, I don't know, I was born in a certain environment with certain circumstances, and I feel then I'm like conditioning is an interesting thing because it's good not to be owned by conditioning, but at the same time, if I'm born with certain capabilities, I might always embrace that or certain strengths rather than going against it. So, for example, I did a business school. I grew up in France in a certain environment, which I feel like I'm probably more able to do certain things, like building a business, than maybe someone who's born in a Yawanawa tribe and maybe has their purpose is more to welcome people who want to go into an inner journey. Yeah, I'd love to ask you more practically, how was your journey of building a successful coaching business in the last 5 years? Like, what were the steps?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so many steps, but let's see if I can break it down. I would say step one was fully surrendering to the fact that I couldn't do it alone. And I think with people who are at the very beginning of the journey, and I see this a lot because I do coach a lot of beginners as well as more advanced people, they say that they're like, I was trying to do it on my own for so long, and I even went through that, right? I'm like, oh, I can do it. I don't need to invest in myself. So I would say step one was surrendering to I cannot do this alone. And as soon as I made that first big investment in myself, it was such a quantum leap because by me, and this is beautifully on topic, by me investing that amount of money into my vision, it kickstarted that actual timeline because it was holding me accountable. There was inherently, we do have an attachment to money, and there's like a lot of fear attached to money and letting go. It feels like a lot, there's a lot of weight. We can see that as a negative thing, or we can actually see that as something that really kickstarts us to change, kickstarts us to action. So first step was making that big investment, and I made it back within like 3 months times three. And then I kept reinvesting the money, and that's where a lot of people get tripped up too. No, you
Was
have
that
to.
with Elena that you started
Yeah,
working?
so my first investment was with a coach named Rachel Bell, and then the second investment I made and third one was with Elena. So I invested, kept investing, and then after Elena, hired not even business coaches, like investing in myself in so many different ways, going on the Yawanawa retreat, working with body workers, with inner work healers. It takes a whole team and village because in order to become a match for the life and business I now have, I had to do a lot of deprogramming, a lot of unlearning, a lot of healing, a lot of taking bold actions, like taking big risks and betting on myself. And that meant investing a lot of time, energy, and money. So constant reinvesting in myself, constant devotion. I'm sure you felt like this too. It's ups and downs. There have been so many times where I'm like, oh, I just want to throw it all away and get a 9 to 5, but I'm not actually going to do it because I know this is my path. So yeah, it's just been a lot of that rinse and repeat, trying things, failing, but failure is not really real a lot. And one big part of the journey too that I preach a lot about was skill acquisition. So it's about mastering the marketing skills, mastering sales skills, mastering creating a powerful offer. That once I did that, then it became even easier because you're coming from a skill set that's timeless. So it doesn't matter if the social media game changes or whatever. Like if you know how to market, you know how to market. You just adapt to the changing landscape. So yeah, all of that combined was just a recipe for where I'm at now. And it just keeps going up and up and up.
Thank you. That's exciting. Thank you, Regina. That's a really interesting topic in the coaching world I'd love to touch upon, which is you mentioned just the fact of investing already in a coach. You were positioning yourself on a new timeline, and also that like the skills of marketing. So I feel sometimes in the coaching world, um, when you say, as most people do after a few years in Bali, I'm a coach, then the first step is okay, marketing, sell it before you build it, and go high ticket. And there is something around like that law of attraction-ish way to go about, which I feel has a lot of truth to it, and sometimes can be a little bit too much in the way that you also need to deliver your program after. It's not all about
Mm-hmm.
sales. You also need to be actually good at what you're doing. You know, it's
Yes.
almost that joke was like, um, oh, I'm broke. What should I do? Oh, how about we do an abundance program and we sell that? Oh, yeah, you know. So I'd love to hear for you, where's the fine balance between believing in yourself and in your worth and prioritizing that marketing, seeing like working on that, and at the same time knowing that you can deliver on it and not overpromise or sell something very expensive and then have little to deliver after that.
I'm so glad you bring this up because I know we both see this in the industry. There are some people who are so good at marketing, and then I've heard horror stories. Even clients who come to me and they have trauma of, oh, I worked with so and so coach and their marketing was so good, and then it wasn't what I wanted. So my thoughts is like, yes, there's merit to overcoming imposter syndrome, but it's all anchored in, are you being in integrity? So, like you said, it's like, don't promise something that you don't feel like you can deliver on. And then when you are delivering, how can you over deliver? That's something I'm always telling my clients too, of like, over deliver, under promise, and actually care about your clients, right? That's the piece of having an integrity. So, for instance, with my clients, at the end of every experience, so let's say they just went through my 3-month mastermind, I'll have a check-in call with them. I'll schedule time just to see like what worked, what didn't work, how can I improve, what, like genuine feedback, and then always adding value adds to your offer. And I think the biggest thing too, what I see is the difference between those people who walk away with a bitter taste in their mouth and feel like, what the heck, this person marketed this thing and I didn't get it, versus the people who walk away feeling really good and they go on to give referrals, is that piece of actually making sure your client is feeling seen and heard. And I will say too, this also starts with making sure that the clients that you do work with are actual good fits. Because I think a lot of time that happens because maybe that person wasn't in the place to get the results that you said you could deliver because they weren't quite ready. Like you didn't give enough pre-qualifications. So then of course they end up failing. And that's part of you being in integrity. Do not accept clients that aren't a good fit. So yeah, there's that fine line. I know the imposter syndrome comes up with so many people. So I don't want you to hear this if you're watching this and think like, oh no, another reason why I shouldn't do it. Like, no, it's good that you have imposter syndrome because actually some of the most underqualified people don't have imposter syndrome, but just be in integrity with what you truly can deliver on. It just comes down to that.
I love that. And imposter syndrome is also a positive thing. It means you're doing something that puts you out of your comfort zone. So it means you're growing. So it's a good sign.
Exactly. And you had to go through all this too, right, Alex? I mean, like everything I've been sharing, I feel like so many of our journeys are similar because our business is our biggest mirror, right? Like I'm sure you've seen so many parts of yourself, right? Like through what you've been building. You've seen the inner workings of your shadows and your limiting beliefs.
Yes, and so the direction I've been taking only the past few months, it's been quite recent, but after 6.5 years of podcasting, is to become a podcast coach, actually. And imposter syndrome is also very alive when you start a podcast. Who am I to start a podcast and contacting bigger guests for your show, all this. So the imposter syndrome is definitely part of this. As a parenthesis for the viewer, if you're interested in having a free strategy session, I'm giving free strategy sessions to conscious leaders who are contemplating starting their own podcast because I want so many of us light workers, conscious leaders, light leaders to share our voices more on the internet. I've had a lot of my education done through podcasts and YouTube video, and I've been wanting to give back, and I'd love to have so many of us do that too. So there's a link in the description for the viewer if you want to have a chat together and see how I can potentially support you to build your podcast. Yeah, let's have a chat, and I'm looking forward to it. That's share about the messaging of the podcast in my podcast, and I'd love to ask you because I'm still more in the early days of coaching. I'd love to know for people who start on the coaching path. I mean, I've been doing a year. I've been doing some health coaching. I've been coaching people on purpose. I was more like doing one-on-one this way, but I just feel the podcast after doing it for so long and having my expertise really resonates. But how do you usually advise people to get started on the coaching path?
Like in general, in terms of like they're thinking about coaching, what are some tips I have for them? Is that what you mean? Yeah, I would say, by the way, first off, this podcast coaching for you makes so much sense because I have been seeing you do this for years, absolutely crushing it. And that's actually leads me into the answer to my question of a lot of times people get really stuck on their niche and what their first offer should be. And people mull over it for months and months and months. And it's a little bit part of the process, it's part of the exploration process. And what I share with people is like, you are your ideal client. It's a previous version of you. So think about what are your most like biggest transformations that you've gone through recently. And you can even like write this down on a list. What are some notable big transformations or things that you've accomplished in your life? And then from there, you can kind of come up with a list and then you can ask yourself which one feels the most resonant right now. Where's the energy flowing? What's feeling really passionate for you? And then from there, let that help guide you who your first ideal client is. And know that as you're creating your first offer, and I think a lot of people kind of skip over this part or they don't talk about it enough. Your offer is everything. Like you one offer can help scale you to six figures and beyond. I mean, that's exactly what I did. It was one offer that took me to my first 100,000. So don't overlook the importance of making sure your offer solves a specific problem and that there's actually a need for it in the market. So do the proper market research, and it's okay if you're all over the place. It's a little bit part of just it's like part of the initiation as a coach. You might change your mind a bunch of times. You might try different things. It's all a natural part of the process. So enjoy it too. So yeah, there's a couple like three, tips wrapped up into what I just shared.
Thank you. I love that. I'd love to ask you, what was that offer that you mentioned for you?
Yeah, it's the offer that I still do now, actually. It's called UCB, the Unstoppable Creator Blueprint. So it's different than what it was 4 years ago because I wasn't yet the established business person that I am now. But what it is today, it's all about refining, mastering mindset, marketing, and sales skills of a soul aligned six-figure business. So it includes so much from like getting clear on your niche, creating your offer, understanding your scaling and your product suite, learning how to do soulful sales. So like handling objection from an actual place of integrity, but also not in a place where you're just letting people get away with running away from their dreams. Things on how to tell storytelling and your marketing, mastering marketing, like so much. But when I first started, what I had done was just learned how to start the business. So that's what I was teaching people on. And then a little bit of it, as I got better and better at business, the program evolved with me. And so it became what it is today.
Interesting. Yeah, and so it was already business coaching as you were doing the business, or were you doing more life coaching also?
I was doing more life coaching. And then the reason I crossed over is because at the time, not anymore, there's like a bazillion of us, but at the time, there wasn't anyone that was talking about business from the spiritual perspective. Like there weren't many people. And so I got a calling, and this is a big part of the story. Like I had to tune into my channel and trust the direction I was being guided in. And basically, spirit guided me. You need to be this person that you desire. And so that's why there's so much of that fusion of spirituality and business in the way that I teach, because it was something that I wish I had had. But like I said at the beginning, I had just been life coaching, so I could just teach what I knew, right? And that's a part of something too, is as you coach, you're going to get better and better and evolve. So then your ideal client will shift and your offer will get better and better as time goes on.
Thank you. I'd love to ask you, as a coach, more in the early days. There are some people that advocate more to have a product suite. So maybe if you start, you have your offer, but maybe it's higher ticket, so you want to have something. I don't know, maybe a $200 workshop or something, that so people get to trust you before they work with you, and then once they've worked with you, you want to keep working with them to the next level. So I think Elina talks about it. You take people from A to B and then to B to C, C to D, and you can have different programs for different parts of the journey. And then some other people are more like, become the best in the world at that one thing. So let's say you have that program, that offer, and it's already so good, you just keep making it better and better and focus all your energy on that. For example, I had William Brown on the podcast. He's the same. He's often like, okay, if you have that one offer that's making 70% of your sales, like, why do you bother putting energy? Do, the 80-20, the 20% of work that gets 80% of the results. Just become so good at that one thing, maybe even one funnel to that one offer, and really scale that. Where do you feel I could go even personally on
Yeah,
that, in that direction?
I'm honestly a mix of both. So what I tell people and what I went through is it's a little bit first the latter. So it's getting really good at the one offer and it being a medium to high ticket offer. More likely medium, because high ticket I feel like will come once you've established yourself more in your
What do you call
niche.
medium?
Medium would be like 2K, 3K, I would consider high ticket like 7K onwards. But it's open to interpretation. So stretching your leadership ability, stretching your ability to launch and hold yourself through a medium ticket signature offer is what I would say. I would start there first. Then you can start to introduce other things. So normally what I tell my clients is once you've done that, two things. You can either start low and then have them funnel into the signature offer. So that's where you could do many things. People do memberships now, are really popular. You could do short burst experiences. Like that's what I do. Like I'll do sometimes a 2-week like micro niche focus
Mm.
thing that then leads into UCB, or a free experience. And then bring in your high ticket VIP. So that's your highest ticket offer. It's your most exclusive. And then what you're creating through that is tiers of proximity that reflect the value, the price that you have set on your offer, so that it then makes sense, right? So the lowest tier, they're going to be the most removed distance from you, right? Like maybe they're in a group chat, whatever. Signature offer, a little bit more touch. And then your highest ticket, whatever it is, whether it's a high ticket mastermind or one-on-one, is the closest to you. And I've found a lot of success in that, because again, like I was stretched through doing my signature offer. I learned a lot by getting really good at one thing before I started branching out into other things.
Mm. Yeah, so a mix of both. And it's interesting because I feel, especially more in the early days, it's like on one hand, I want a very clear direction, and at the same time, I feel it's not really how life works. Like we need to test quite a few different things and see what works. But I guess when you hire a mentor, you also want to accelerate the timeline, and that's
Exactly.
where you can make the right decisions from the beginning. So that's why I'm always interested to have a mix of both, where you can't just ask, okay, that's the one direction, but at the same time, you can save time also bouncing ideas with mentors. I'd love to ask you also, so for example, in my case with the podcast, I've worked with a lady one-on-one. It was great, and at the same time I feel maybe a group energy is better. But usually
Mm-hmm.
many people say, well, do a few one-on-ones first because it's easier. You just have one person and you get feedback, and you can tailor it very specifically to their needs. At the same time, there's something about the group energy, the mastermind energy, even with the imposter syndrome, for example, when you're in a group, you have other people doing it. It's just harder to have doubts coming the way. You're just doing
Yeah.
it part of the group. Well, when you're one to one, there's almost that self pace can also injure the process. How do you feel? Let's make it very practical. In my case, as a podcast coach, would you start mainly with one on one or group coaching?
I love this question. I get asked this a lot too, like in my own mastermind. So there is merit to what people are saying. The fact that you've done a few one-on-ones, the point of that is so that you can acquire your methodology. So through that, and I went through that too, you're really understanding what is the process that I'm going to take them through that I can then repeat. Because repeatability is what's going to allow you to then scale. But for you, Alex, right? Like, do you feel like you're ready for a group? It sounds like you are. Amazing. So then if you feel ready, trust that. I would go ahead to group and then just look at based what you've done in your one-on-ones. What is this very clear step process that you can take people through? But what you said is it's like you hit the nail on the head. People love community. I told you we do our exit surveys. Every single person says one of their favorite things about my experience was the community. So we understand too, it's like we're not just selling the result, right? We're not selling just information. We're also selling accountability. We're selling the community experience. It's like an all-encompassing experience that you're creating for your people. So what I would focus on for you, Alex, is like this, yeah, next round, or if you even want to do an evergreen, that's something we can talk about too. But having it be a group experience where it's really clear what steps you're going to take them through, but then also incorporating even like open forum, more like mastermind style calls, because that's where a lot of people have the biggest aha moments because they're just hearing, reflecting from other people, and they feel so seen and heard. So having some element where people can express themselves and it's not just you teaching at them is going to create that community experience. And also some kind of like group chat. I use School, Skool, which is like all the rage now. It's amazing. Have you heard of
Yeah.
School?
Yeah, I love school.
Yeah,
Like I follow a lot from Ozzy. I was following Sam Ovens back in the days of consulting.com and all this. So I really
exactly.
like school as a platform. And once I have a good case for it, it's probably the platform I'm going to use.
I think it's great. But with your niche, there's a need for it. More people are wanting to create podcasts. So I feel like you're gonna absolutely thrive and crush it because there's a need for it. And I love that you're niching it down because it's specifically light workers and healers, right? So for me, if I'm looking to start a podcast and I have the choice between just a regular person to help me do it versus you, Alex, who speaks my language of like understanding my light workers and starseed self, I'm gonna hire you. So I'm really excited for you.
Thank you, Regina. Actually, I agree with that. And I've started another YouTube channel called the Conscious Podcast Lab. And that's exactly the positioning. So people want to do a podcast, but they're also are in, uh, are in that vibe. So for the viewer, again, if you want to start a podcast, so you can check out my new channel, Conscious Podcast Lab, which is more me as a teacher with a whiteboard, um, doing that. And at the same time, yeah, it's interesting to have like, I have that direction. And do you know Sunny Lenarduzzi?
Mm-mm.
She's got a quite a big YouTube channel, and she has a very clear funnel, which is a YouTube channel with a content in your niche leading to a call and then to a mastermind high ticket program. I like this online, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And at the same time, I feel sometimes the coaching world, like just I'll speak personally as being a coach, it gets a little bit lonely, a little bit too much online. So on the
Mm.
online game, it's good to be very niched and to be I feel very intentional, very niche. Well, in the living in Bali in Ubud, I'm actually starting next week something called Ubud Coaches Meetups, and this is because I want to co-create more and I want to be more in person also, and that might lead to me actually doing more masterminds of coaches, but in person. And because when you do things in person, you don't need to go as niche, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's a more limited number of people. So it's just a reflection on, and also a question on, like, I have a direction with the podcast and how I want it to be, and at the same time, I'm a I'm a little opportunistic also in my life, and like I live in Ubud, I'm connected with a lot of coaches. I can put together these events pretty easily and see where that comes from. It's almost like a masculine and a feminine. I don't know if you have a preference between like being super, I'm going to create this and I have a 6 months plan for it, versus I'm going to have that direction, but also do what excites me and see what comes from it and potentially shift my offer, shift my services based on what comes in my life. Like, what's the balance there?
It's so funny you ask this because my whole thing is both. And actually, I'm even thinking about doing a free or low cost thing on this next week because it really is a dance between both. Specifically because we are doing this in tune to a higher source, a higher spirit. So you need
Mm.
to be tuned into that. But then, right, extreme of anything can be dangerous. So I know I've worked with coaches, for instance, where it was very much like strategy, this and that, and it has to be this way. And then I've also worked with the coaches that are like, just flow and follow the passion. And then my sales tapered off. So I think there's merit in both. And I think that is genius that you're doing that in person because in this post-COVID world, people are craving in-person events. You are in the mecca of coaches, Alex. I'm like, if I was there, I'm like, I would do something similar because people are craving that. Like, yes, online is still going to be a viable market, but more and more people want the in-person stuff. That's why like our retreats are selling out and people just want that and you have an actual market for it. So I'm again excited for you. I think you're like exactly where you need to be, keeping it more general in person and then having it super niche in online is a recipe for success.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll see. I feel with mastermind it's interesting because you can also create something where you're less advanced, right? I mean, I feel there's two ways to do mastermind. One is to do a mastermind as a teacher. So, for example, if I do a group coaching on starting a podcast, there will be a mastermind element to it with other people starting their podcast. But it's clear that I know what I'm doing. I have a curriculum and I'm the clear teacher and leader of the group. Plus, there's a mastermind element of people will come up with ideas. Hey, I did that differently. Oh, that's interesting. And we'll all add up. And then there's another way to do mastermind, which is just being an organizer. So
Mm-hmm.
in my case, for example, um, I can be the leader of a group for starting a podcast. However, what I'm also considering is, oh, I could do a mastermind of already successful podcasters, in which case I feel I have less to teach, but the value is in simply like bringing people together, maybe bringing guest speakers and experts and this. So, yeah, what in general, do you feel these two types of mastermind work? Like, do you even call it mastermind, the first case? Or what do you call mastermind?
Yeah, I call that masterminding too. I agree with you. I think both are just different styles of running masterminds. And I've even had friends wanting to start something similar to the second one that you shared, where it's more about them organizing it. And then you have very certain pre qualifications, right? So, for instance, for yours, in order for you to enter this mastermind, you have to at least have 10 podcast episodes out, like whatever the precursor is. Yeah, I think there's merit to both of them. I see how like the latter, you could actually still create and generate revenue from it, but the model is going to be a little bit different because the revenue would become from like the organization less from you, for instance, providing a library of resources and being the main leader there. This even reminds me of something like my sister is a part of, where she pays X number of dollars per year to be part of this group where she's in a pod. And she's essentially paying for the organizer to organize the online chat aspect, but then they also do in-person events too in Miami. So it's really cool, like seeing the different models that people do. And just to shout that out, it's called Maisha. It's for moms. So my sister's a brand new mom, so it's for like new moms. So it's really cool seeing like the different ways that people do it.
Yeah, thank you. I like the hybrids also. For example, here in Bali, you probably know Fabex, they're in Austin now. And my partner did it, and it's 2 months online, but then you come 1 week in Bali and do that. I'll probably do that with the podcast too. Like people can prepare, but then come to Bali in a resort with a studio and record there. Like having those hybrids, I think are pretty cool. We've
Yeah.
already, yeah, you go.
I like that because there's studios and stuff already in Bali too. Yeah, that's genius. I love that.
Yeah, and so as we're touching more towards the end of our episode, I'd love to ask you, circling it back to making money and having impact with it. I'd like to ask you personally, with all the money you generated, what's your bigger why?
Mm, thanks for asking this. Yeah. To me, I feel like the reason I'm doing all that I'm doing is to show people that anything is possible and to be that note of possibility for them. So I know that just by me living my highest truth, by calling in my desires, by having the successful business, by fulfilling whatever it is that I'm here to create, my mission and purpose, reminding people that that's possible for them too. It's like the stories that I've seen where, people come to me of like, wow, like you went from broke and lost and now you've created this. Like, thank you for showing me that I can do that too. So yeah, doing this for humanity and this beautiful collective mission that we're on as well as we all remind people that they have the power to create whatever they desire. Yeah.
And do you have also any, I don't know, any like precise or concrete things you want to do with that money that you're earning?
Yes, things I'm already doing is giving back, right? Like, especially to the indigenous communities, that's something that's really important to me. And also just like spreading the wealth in so many different ways, even in like the micro moments. Like, I'm always going to be the person that's going to treat my friends and family, or if, there's a homeless person on the street, like over giving to them, tipping people extra. Like, I really see this as being a flow that God's given to me that I want to project outward. So even like investing in locally owned businesses instead of the franchise supermarket, like so many different ways it's shown up. And yeah, as I continue to build this wealth, I have some really big projects I want to continue doing with the indigenous and continuing to give back to them because that's something that I'm really passionate about.
Amazing. Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Hmm. I'd love to ask you also a question on something a little different, but I'm curious because I know you've been working a lot with ayahuasca, but I've seen quite a few people from our community in Bali, especially the ones that moved to the US and to Austin, get more into Christianity and the
Yes.
path of Jesus, which I think is amazing if people like are more connected to their heart and kinder, whatever religious frame they want to choose. And at the same time, I'm a little bit surprised because I feel, um, I don't know, I feel for me, religion is like has all these beautiful things and sometimes a bit that dogmatic, like my way is the way. I don't know if it's something you have to say on because I feel there's a little bit of a trend from maybe what could be called New Age spiritual people in Bali, then being like, oh, now I've found Jesus and say found Jesus. This is the way my life is so much better. And yeah, how do you feel about that?
I love that you brought this up, Alex, because it's definitely something I've noticed. Because, I'm plugged into the community too. I'm like, what's going on? There's a trend here. And, I think there is merit to it. And it's been my own like curiosity of like why is this been happening? Like, just trying to be open-minded and receptive. But to me, it is a little confusing too to go from something that is a little bit more open that back to something that's historically a little bit more dogmatic and closed. So I just try to stay open hearted, open mind to it. But I think it is interesting, and not even Bali community. I've been seeing this like across the board. So I'm just trying to stay open to it. I definitely believe in Jesus. I'm open to it. But then there is a side of me that's like, but then isn't this like against what you were thinking before? Like, how did you go from this to such an extreme? So it's like a little bit of a mystery to me as well. But I just keep tuning in and being open to it. I'm sure similar for you, right?
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Thanks. Yeah, for me, it's like, as long as it makes you happy and makes you being a good, kind person, people can, have their own personal relationship with God. And I know even people who um, label themselves as a Christian, totally, there's a unique connection you can have with God and with Jesus in all these ways. But yeah, thank you for sharing on this. Regina, now we're arriving towards the end. I'd love to know, is there anything else you'd feel like sharing with me or the viewer for this episode?
Yeah, I think what's coming through is, if you're watching this, just want to remind you that you're exactly where you need to be, and just to remind you that there is a higher source, a higher power that's guiding you. So don't be afraid to pray and to ask for help, because yeah, you're here to do big things.
Amazing. And we'll put some links in the description to your work and your website. Like, what's next for you also? What are you excited about with your business?
Yeah, I'm super excited. We have a retreat coming up in February to the Yawanawa Village, our ayahuasca retreats. We're almost full actually. And yeah, besides that, just continuing to have the doors to my mastermind open. I also have some fun, exciting things I'm cooking up for next year that I'm not quite ready to announce yet. But yeah, feel free if you guys are watching this, check out my website. There's also some free master classes there. And yeah, just don't be afraid to say hi. Shoot me a DM. Don't be a stranger.
Amazing. Thank you, Regina. And I love also what you shared about you exactly where you need to be. That's also one thing which could be a whole topic in the coaching
Yeah.
world. Is playing with, okay, let's help you get where you want to be, and at the same time, not playing on the pushing on the pain too much. Where uh, it's good to stay in that enlightenment of things are perfect, and to maybe hire a coach and want to have the outcome from a
Yes,
place of like, okay, that's exciting and that's what I want, but already being as content as graceful as possible with what we already have, right? And playing with that kind of
exactly.
almost paradoxical, like I'm very content with what I have and I want more.
It's all paradoxical. None of this makes sense.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Regina.
Alex.
And yeah, it doesn't, but we play the game and have fun with it. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for all the viewers. If you stayed until the end, I guess you enjoyed that episode. Feel free to share, like, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And also, I love to hear from everyone who watches the episode. So if you go in the comments on YouTube, say what you have as a main takeaway from that episode. What did you learn? And also, do you have other comments, follow-up questions, things you want to share, feedback about it? Let me know. I watch all the comments. I read them all and reply to them all. Thank you, Regina, and thank you, everyone. Much love.